You started off your talk when you were talking about ايش المثل مرة ثانية that you said?
7 صنايع.
سبع صنايع. Like what you're calling سبع صنايع, and also what you had mentioned to me, prior to this call when we were sort of like prepping, and you said multitasking, you know?
Yeah.
What I love about this trajectory actually is really that you are not asserting a loyalty to a particular discipline or a particular industry. And in fact, you are asserting your loyalty to a certain kind of politics, a sort of intervention in what you think are really important power structures that are operating around you in like various locations.
The world wants us to be categorized in one specific area. They want us to do one thing, and I think it's an act of rebellion to say no.
Okay, so hi everyone. It is so lovely to see you here on the very last day of Ramadan. So Eid Mubarak in advance. And I am so pleased that today we have with us somebody who is a special guest and a person that I think is really the perfect person to invite into our classroom as we transition in this last 1/3 of our class together. Zaina Zaarour is the head of programs at Alserkal Avenue. She's somebody that I knew of, but only got to meet in person when I received a lovely invitation from her late last year. So it was kind of late November. I had just arrived back from a trip to the US, and I get this email saying, "This is really last minute, but would you be interested in moderating a talk for us?" And it's actually an exhibition that sort of itself was a little last minute, but we think you're going to like the concept. And I was like, I wonder what this thing is going to be. And it turns out that this exhibition was a historic exhibition that included a large number of Palestinian artworks and artworks about Palestine from the Barjeel Art Foundation, and a large number of archival images from the Palestinian Museum, curated together in this really impressive space at this very important moment in time where many of us who lived in Dubai were really trying to make sense of this historic moment that we were living through. And it took me a second to say, absolutely, yes, count me in. And in literally 48 hours, I met with Zaina, I met with Kevin, other members of their team, the curators, to try to understand what is the rationale around this exhibition, which was called On This Land. And it was, I would say, perhaps one of the most important educational experiences I've had in my life. And so I really owe Zaina a ton of gratitude, actually, for thinking of me for this. And I feel like at this moment, I'm able to kind of maybe offer something back to her where she can share with us something about her educational journey and her work at the Alserkal Avenue in this particular exhibition on this land, but also more generally. And the reason that I was interested in having her speak about it is because I actually think there was a very interesting kind of collaboration that happened. An exhibition like this, that's this big and this impressive with this many works, normally take years of research, years of thinking about how you're going to hang things, where you're going to put them, how you're going to have people in that space. And they pulled it off literally in a few weeks. And so there was something super interesting about this collaboration, which included Sultan Al-Qasimi at the Barjeel Art Foundation, Amir Shomali, who was the acting director of the Palestinian Museum, and of course, Alserkal. So the person kind of representing them at the talk that I moderated was Vilma Jakorte, but many other members of Alserkal Foundation and Alserkal Avenue at that point. And so one of the things that I'd love to have her speak to us about really is this concept of collaboration, how it appears in her work at the moment, but also what she's learned along the way until she got to this point, because her work didn't start at Alserkal. She actually has some really foundational, rich experiences at the intersection of art, activism, and, as I've learned more recently, gender. And so one of the things that she's also going to be sharing with us is some of her own work, which she's doing with somebody that I consider actually a mentor to me, Suad Joseph, on questions of who produces knowledge about gender in our region. And so many of the themes that we've discussed in our class around, for example, knowledge production in Arabic versus in English, or who gets to speak about what and in what way, are things that animate Zaina's research interests. So I'm really, really pleased to have her with us today, and I look forward to hearing from her. She's going to give us a brief presentation, just kind of like highlighting some of those themes that I just mentioned to you, and then we can sort of dig in with a bunch of like, questions and reflections with her. So thank you, Zaina.
Thank you so much, Mai, for the lovely introduction. I really feel very happy to be with you all and to be speaking to you. And it's this kind of relationships and collaborations that start maybe in a class and then can continue for other things coming up. So I will start my little presentation. Please don't, it's not a presentation, so I will not be speaking a lot. It's just some thoughts, and I'm thinking about it as like questions that we can ask ourselves and each other. Just 1 second. So I have been thinking recently about the notion of collaboration and what it means in relation to gender and multiple things in the arts and culture, but also in other parts of our lives or in other areas that we're working on. I'll give you a quick introduction about myself. Okay, so a little background about myself. For those of you who speak Arabic, there's a saying in Arabic that is like سبع صنايع, and then the rest of it والبخت ضايع, which is like a person who has like 7 professions and then no luck at all. But I would like to take that saying and say actually the 7 professions or the different areas that I jumped into were really, really helpful and made me reach where I am today or become who I am today. I did my BA in journalism, radio broadcasting and TV in Birzeit University. And there so a little bit about Birzeit University. It's the main university or like the biggest university in Palestine. It's in Ramallah or a small village called Birzeit next to Ramallah. And what's special about Birzeit is that students from all the areas of Palestine come to it and study together. The social environment and the networking that happen in Birzeit stay with you for a very long time. And you become very attached to there's a special charm to this university, let's say, and what it offers its students. After that, I also did my master's in Birzeit University, but I did my master's in a program titled Israeli Studies. It's kind of a settler colonial studies where you study politics, economics, you study arts in the settler colonial state. And there I focused my research on the Israeli feminist movement and tried to understand what it means to start, what does it mean to start a feminist movement in such a context. Now, for me to study that, I had to break so many walls, being Palestinian, starting to learn Hebrew, and also reading all of this literature was also a challenge to beat and to really give it its chance as a topic of study. Of course, between that, I did so many other things, from volunteering in different initiatives, from being in the arts and culture in performing and visual arts, working with the Qattan Foundation. I don't know if you've heard about it, the Abdul Mahsen Qattan Foundation in Palestine. So many other projects. But before I choose a couple of examples that I would like to speak to you about, I have this slide here with some questions and some ideas that I would like to put on the table for us to think about. First is this idea of fail versus success, and what is failure and what is success in the course of our lives. What does it mean for us? How do we see it today? If we think of a failure that we pass through or a success, how does it look today? And then breaking or reproducing gender hierarchies and its relationship to failure and success, and then the optics and real change in relation to gender. And here I have like a little story. So in Palestine, let's say in 2014, 2015, a group of young people, we came together and we were like, there needs to be something that is moving. We need to do something in that context. And we got together and we started a youth initiative that had a cultural side to it, where we would organize talks around different topics. We organized voluntary work. So it had different activities to it. After 2 years of working with this initiative, I started realizing that even though we were trying to break the gender hierarchies and the gender roles and the gender norms in our society, we unfortunately failed, because also another word to keep in mind, easy versus difficult when it comes to gender. And now when we come to the examples, we can talk more about it. So yeah, that didn't work. The hierarchies were very visible and we were able to see them, which made us very, very frustrated. That was a failure, but it also led to something else. It led to us thinking, okay, now this happened, what else? What else can we create? What other space can we create for a space where these gender hierarchies can be challenged again? So other initiatives started that had better successes, and more space were open for women in Palestine at that time. Now the next point is this kind of optics and real change, because when I was speaking to Mai also the other day, we were discussing how sometimes we hear the sentence that in the arts and culture in particular, sometimes it is said that, oh, the arts and culture is a woman-led field. But then if we pause for a second and say, okay, this first step, yes, okay, good, women-led, amazing, and it makes a huge difference also from experience. It makes a huge difference. But then these women that are leading, what kind of ideology are they leading? What kind of methodology are we using in our day-to-day lives? Or even worse, even these majority women institutions who make the decisions, is there a man taking the decisions? Are these gender hierarchies broken really forever? Is there a pay equality in these institutions? So many questions. And if you see, I have more questions than answers here, and then we can talk more about it. I have 3 examples that I wanted to share with you from my projects that I was part of. And I'm starting in a chronological order, starting with a very intriguing project that Mai also spoke about. It's titled Mapping the Production of Knowledge on Women and Gender in the Arab Region. And this project is a real collaboration. It's a collaboration between 6 universities. I started it when I was still a postgraduate student in Birzeit University. And the goal of this project is to map everything that has been written on women and gender in the Arab region from 1970 until 2020 or 2022. So this is a very ambitious project, and it's still going on until today, after almost 4 years, and we're not even close to finishing it. Here, I want to speak about this long-term commitments, long-term collaborations that are also voluntary. So everyone is a volunteer in this project. Being a volunteer for 4 years is not something so easy. And then this commitment and continuous learning. So we have a faculty of 6 professors from the 6 universities, and then 6 researchers representing the 6 universities, even though we all graduated from our universities. I will send you the link. I will share the link with Mai. It's a database right now. It has different thematics. You can search by thematic, you can search by year, you can search by geography. The aim here is to also think together what has been written, how was it written, what ideology is it carrying, and how can young scholars or early career scholars add to this pool of thousands and thousands of articles and books about gender and women. What can we add? What is missing? What can we change the narrative about? And this is very important from our position here, here and today. The next project that I wanted to bring up is this exhibition. It was titled From Quarantine to the Sea. I was leading an organization in a small city called Tulkarem. Tulkarem is a small city north of the West Bank. And when we were talking, it was a long-term project that ended with an exhibition. When we started talking about this exhibition, we started looking for a curator. So this is why I have the sentence here that says collaboration is difficult. Meaning, like in the context of Palestine and in many other similar contexts, the easy way out would be to work one with an individual, because always working with an individual, one voice is easier. And then working with a man who is from the area would have been a much easier solution for us at that context, meaning that men, almost all the men have higher mobility than women due to family restraints and other like geographical obstacles, especially in the context of the occupation in the West Bank. So that was the easy way out. But then we paused for a little bit and said, okay, this is the easy way out, but it's not the most interesting. So we started looking and we found a collective called Sada. Sada Collective is a group of women, students actually, they were still studying art. And they formed this curatorial collective. So we contacted them and we worked together to produce an exhibition that was one of the best exhibitions, honestly, with the limited resources that we've had. We had a very rich experience spanning with artists from all of Palestine, even artists from Gaza at that point sent us their works to be displayed in the West Bank, which was a huge, it was a huge thing. I wanted to show you this video because this is a symbol of our collaboration. This is our credit wall in the exhibition. It's just everyone who worked in that exhibition had their photograph on the wall. It's also this humble context and inclusion in its real form. Then the last. Not the last, but one of the project that I want to end this brief presentation on before we start the discussion is On This Land. And here, the story of how On This Land came up is also very intriguing. It's the key word here is trust, because the first conversation that started on this land was on the 19th of October, and On This Land opened on the 19th of November. So it's only 1 month to pull this exhibition and open our doors to the audience. 1 month that would include all production, all curatorial conversations, all picking the artworks, writing the copy for the exhibition, making the little exhibition guide, having programming in the exhibition that was also an integral part of it. So 1 month, when such exhibitions would take years, as Mai was saying in her introduction. So yeah, so here trust. Why trust? Because all of the partners that were included, so Alserkal, but also Barjeel Art Foundation and the Palestinian Museum, had trust between them that meant that they can jump right in, that they trusted each other, that this will be a success. And here sometimes we lack this trust between us to create these kind of collaborations or meaningful collaborations in our projects. So this is just a brief about On This Land. I also have the 3D tour, maybe we can get to it later. And the last idea I also want to throw on the table is this idea of a shrinking space and how we can counter that by creating space. Each of us in their own role now, whether a student, whether a professor, whether working in any institution, in a world we're living in today where all spaces are shrinking for multiple people. Um, so I feel that each of us has a duty to take our role and try to create as much space as we can for people who wouldn't have that space in any other place. Here, I remember having the Bu Kulthum concert in Alserkal in 2022, which was just such an emotional experience, and many other projects that I've done here, but also in other places. So I think creating space, yeah, we should all carry it with us, especially in these very dark times. So yeah, I want to stop here, and maybe we can have a conversation. Continue.
That's great. Thank you so much, Zaina, for this beautiful overview, thematic overview of the various ways in which you've thought really hard about questions of collaboration, and also of what it means to not simply write about gender, but to practice it in your everyday, whether it's in curation or it's in your activism, and across multiple locations and multiple contexts. So this is really super rich. And I think if you'd allow me, I'm going to start from where you ended, which is this invitation for all of us to think together about what it means to insist on creating space, especially under conditions where spaces are being not simply reduced or flattened, but where you, especially at the moment, actually have, in some ways, a complete silencing, actually, of certain kinds of voices. And we've seen it across the board in different locations, some of them in our own region, but certainly in Europe and in the US, of shows being canceled for particular artists, awards being revoked, people being completely silenced, even on university campuses. And so actually, I would love if you can perhaps build a little bit on the broad overview that you gave of On This Land by perhaps just walking us through the exhibition itself, because although the exhibition was short-lived, you're right, I think it was not on for a particularly long period of time. And that's because it wasn't planned from the beginning. The way I understood it, there was like a window of opportunity, like something got canceled. And then there was a question of what do we really absolutely need to do in this moment that would be super relevant to the community around us. And although it was super ambitious and involved like a lot of coordination, a lot of work, but because there was a sort of a fundamental agreement that this was a priority, that it was important to the people at Alserkal and at the other two organizations that were involved, but also just normal people who live in the city. I mean, I know for a fact that people came from Abu Dhabi, people came from Sharjah, and even after the exhibition was over, you produced a three-dimensional map of the exhibition space. So even people who couldn't make it for that particular point in time might actually be able to visit it at a later point in time. And so if you could share a little bit of that with us, and maybe if you could also just to give people a super concrete feel of what was in fact in that space. One example that comes from the Palestinian Museum archive, and then one example kind of from the Barjeel artwork collection, I think that could make things just a bit more tangible for people.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know if any of you or all of you have been to Alserkal. So I'm going outside here just to show you the building. This is concrete. And concrete is a very challenging building just because of its size. So whenever we have an exhibition there, the exhibition needs to have size and height, but also that gave us some opportunities. So if we walk in here, you see the artworks that were all the artworks come from the Barjeel Art Foundation collection. It's around 100 works, if I'm not mistaken. And then here on the sides, you find pictures of the Palestinian Museum Digital Archive project that they collected over the years. I'll get to that in a bit. These works from the Barjeel art collection, they span over this kind of cube. We can go around it in a bit. But they chose all the works from Palestinian artists, or most of the works that are from Palestinian artists, but also from Arab artists that had work about Palestine. And this was super important also in the context of solidarity and in the context of that moment in the war, where we all felt that this kind of solidarity was very important. I want to speak here about, and not only Palestinian artists and artworks about Palestine, but they tried to find also artworks around Gaza in particular, or artists who worked around Gaza in that moment in time. And so the emotions were very high once you enter the space. I want to speak about this particular artwork here by Layan Shawabke. It's titled "Ladies of Gaza." Layan Shawabke was a Palestinian artist, a very promising artist. She unfortunately passed away in 2009 due to cancer. So this artwork of her was based on a long-term research project about women, not only in Palestine but in the world. So she would sketch these women, and you can see her vivid colors and the shapes that are very particular to her work. And like the Barjeel Art Foundation team were saying that this work was never exhibited in this way. It was only exhibited once, another time in Barjeel Art Foundation, but due to its size, it's like 2 meters, more than 2 meters, 2.4 meters. It needed a space to breathe. And it just feels that with all the other artworks and with this huge space, it had its moment to just sit there and really, really breathe. So this is the first artwork that I wanted to speak about. And then this artwork is by Jabra Ibrahim Jabra. I don't know if you've heard about him. He's also a very well-known writer and poet. This artwork was found in a car garage in Bethlehem in Palestine. It was covered in oil and grease from the car garage. And the researcher who found it, George Al-Ama, found it in this car garage, and he immediately recognized it and kind of saved it from that context. So you see here, artworks are all having their own life story. Each of these artworks had a moment to be exhibited and to be seen also together. And one more thing before we move to the archives, if you see, there's also, so we spoke about trust between the partners, but there's also courage and bravery from everyone involved to have a canvas this close to the ground, in the reach of children who might touch it, who might push it. That is something that was very, very brave. And we had this discussion. It was a conscious decision to put the works as close to the people as possible, even though we know that this is a danger to the artworks. So all the partners agreed that this is more important than actually keeping the works away. Of course, we had security, we had volunteers all the time to make sure that the works were in good shape and no one actually harmed them. Moving to the digital archive, the idea here was to show the life in Gaza. All of these photographs come from private or family collections from Gaza, about Gaza, or people that were photographed in Gaza, paying homage to that city in that particular moment that is unfortunately still going on as we speak today. It was this idea of having the people watching us, watching them, or watching us, watching the art, having humans, people, families also visible on the walls of the exhibition. I will show you here. We come closer. This is a very interesting photograph that is taken in the Shata refugee camp in Gaza of two young girls standing next to a painting by artist Fathi Ghaban, who unfortunately passed away, I think, a month ago or 2 months ago due to illness and not being able to get treatment in the war. So here we have his painting with people taking photographs next to him. Yeah, now looking at this, it's really it's heart-wrenching. And many others. Like if you take a moment here to look at Amal Al-Qasim, sister of Umar Al-Qasim, at the beach in Rafah. You can see the joy, a family trip. Maybe she's sending a photo to someone. Like you start thinking of all this potential or possible stories that are no longer possible in the time that we're living in. And of course, the exhibition continues. And the exhibition space was not only a space for exhibition, it was also a space for all the programming, all the talks. For example, the one that my was part of took place in the exhibition space. We've had play readings taking place here in the back, next to all these artworks as well. Yeah, I can share the link also with you. It's worth looking at these works.
That's really great, Zaina. Thank you so much for this, honestly. And I think we could probably, dedicate an entire whole session just simply, kind of on this exhibition. Kind of the curatorial choices, the programming around it. Even, this question of like, what does it mean to make an exhibition during a time like this? Like, what does it actually mean? And I think this, for example, point that you talked about, which is like the courage to not care too much about what the typical norms are under quote unquote normal circumstances, but actually do something that is a necessary intervention for the time, creates this kind of creating space that you were talking about. So I remember at the event where I moderated, there were lots of children. There were also lots of old people, and there were just lots of people. And nobody was damaging the art. Actually, people were really, this was my impression, happy to be in that space together. So I think in some ways, those kinds of memories that those children have had enable them also not to be afraid of art, not to feel less than it, to be able to stand next to it, and to be able to know what it means to, witness a moment, a historical moment. So, so really, thank you so much for that. And I want to make sure that we also have enough time to, talk to you about the other really wonderful things that you've shared with us. And perhaps I'm going to ask one kind of question, and then I'm going to open it up for other people to sort of jump in with theirs. But I'm going to take you back to that very first experience that you shared with us about your education and about how, in some ways, Jamiat Birzeit was a really important place for you in those formative years. And you had mentioned that your second degree, aside from journalism, was in Israeli studies. And so I was wondering whether you could share with us sort of what people's reactions have been to you, when you share that with them. Like, are people kind of like, oh, this is normal? Or do people have a kind of set of reactions that they typically come to you with when they find that out? And what is your view on that? I'd love if you could share that with us.
Yeah, no, this is a very interesting question because I myself have mixed feelings when I tell people this. Like I always try to anticipate what the reaction might be. Some people don't understand what is it, and especially me, like being involved in the arts and culture. Like, what does that have to do with anything? Which is true. Sometimes I also ask myself, like. Why why, but for me it was a super important experience to be in at that time. I took the time to actually read a lot and understand a lot and learn a lot about the context, a context that I might not have had the time before to really delve deeper into it and understand it more. Learning Hebrew was a great, it was a very important thing for me to do at that time. Also reclaiming some of the knowledges that we deny ourselves of, especially as Palestinians. I remember when I was presenting my thesis proposal to the committee of professors. My thesis was around medieval Jewish philosophy, and it's in religion. And one of the professors asked me, "How are you contributing to the Palestinian cause when you're studying medieval Jewish philosophy?" So I was taken aback, and I thought about it a lot. And then I was like, I can also reclaim history, and I can also study religion, and I can also study Judaism or Islam or Christianity. I can also study physics or science, any type of science. Like I'm part of a bigger humanity, and this also belongs to me. While the world wants us to be categorized in one specific area. They want us to do one thing, and I think it's an act of rebellion to say no. I want to study Judaism in the medieval times. This is also something that I'm interested in. So it's these kinds of questions, and I don't have an answer, and sometimes I shy away from saying it. Sometimes no, I say it. So it depends also in the context.
Thank you, Zaina. I really appreciate that. And I also can't tell you how relevant it is to so many of the discussions that we've been having in our own class, about knowledge, what constitutes knowledge as being valid, who gets to speak as the knower and who only gets to be a data point, and what does it mean to insist on this thing that you're saying, which is that in fact, being able to pursue knowledge as you want and to take a stance on it on terms that are favorable to you is itself an important kind of intervention. So I really appreciate you sharing this. And I also want to tell you that one of the readings that we did for this class was actually by Islah Jad, who's a professor at Birzeit and also kind of, I guess, head of the gender studies program there.
Yeah.
So it feels like we visited Birzeit text, and now we're visiting it through your story. So thank you so much. Maybe I can kind of like kickstart the conversation by just asking you, Zaina, to tell us a little bit more about, what brought you to Dubai, because we heard a lot about sort of where you grew up, where you did your initial work, and then most recently in this last year, this amazing exhibition that we just heard about. But bridging in a way that transition from sort of, where you were to where you are now, would you be able to share with us a little bit about, how that happened? The reason that I'm asking is because, obviously one of the things that we're also looking at in this class is really kind of looking at in some ways different kinds of experiences that working women have in the Gulf in a variety of industries. So in your case, art and culture, but also in a variety of like migratory pathways or transitions. So if you could maybe share some of that would be great.
It's how I ended up in Dubai is part coincidence, part I don't know what other parts are there. But my partner Faris was in Canada starting his PhD, and we were trying to be united together because I was in Palestine. And as expected, I didn't get a visa, and we were in a kind of like in between state. We didn't know how can we be together, and so Dubai rose as this place where we can actually be together and settle down at least for some time. So that was kind of a happy coincidence. And here it's like the ease of coming to Dubai, right? And of course, I was fortunate to get this job with Alserkal, which I'm very grateful to have. yeah, but it's this ease of like the paperwork, but also yeah, being able to be together at this time in a place like Dubai.
Yeah, thank you, Zaina. And I actually have this like itch to say something. You know, you started off your talk when you were talking about ايش المثل مرة ثانية that you said?
سبع صنايع.
سبع صنايع. Okay, so you know, it's kind of like a very typical thing that smart people do. They're a little self-deprecating, you know what I mean? But I want to tell you that like what you're calling سبع صنايع, and also what you had mentioned to me, you know, prior to this call when we were sort of like prepping, and you said multitasking, you know?
Yeah.
What I love about this trajectory actually is really that you are not asserting a loyalty to a particular discipline or a particular industry. And in fact, you are asserting your loyalty to a certain kind of politics, a sort of intervention in what you think are really important power structures that are operating around you in like various locations. So whether it's a kind of capitalist intervention in some of the work that you were doing in Palestine, or it's a kind of, you know, important creation of space, like what you were doing, you know, more recently in Dubai. I think, you know, to me, that's what's held in common. So it's not so much the category that matters, but actually the process itself or what you're doing with it. Um, this is just my,
Yeah.
you know, observation kind of at this point. But
Yeah.
I wanted just to check with Lynn. Did you want to say something? Because I see your microphone on.
Yeah, so it's like it's two parallel lines, right? Education, because there is no or at the time that I started, there was some art education in Palestine, and I'm not an artist. I don't have an artist practice, like a visual artist practice per se. But when I was younger, I started being part of many art projects, specifically in the performing arts in Palestine, in theater and contemporary dance. So that's like a parallel universe that I was part of. And then when I graduated my BA, I immediately joined Abdul Mohsen Qattan Foundation, the AM Qattan Foundation, for their arts and culture program. And there I started to become deeper in the visual arts sector or field, especially working on the Young Artist of the Year award, which is a project that happens every 2 years, and it celebrates young artists. Young artists apply. We have a committee, and the Young Artist of the Year is chosen or is given a prize, and it's a long-lasting project. So that was one of the highlights. I was also through Qatan Foundation, I got to know biennales. I was part of Qalandia International Art Biennale in Palestine that was taking place at the time. So it's kind of like education by practice and not by an actual educational institute on curatorial studies or art. I don't know if that answers your question. And this goes back to the seven profession, right? So you need to, it's also a survival mode. You need to know so many skills that in any context you can kind of survive or find something to do. And this was part of the multiple tries. So at that point, we came together. We know that we wanted to do something, and then we formed this curatorial committee that has everyone. And we were like 5 people, and it's the most difficult thing to do, of course, to work with 5 different people with 5 different opinions. But then we knew that we needed to do something, and we know that we had 3 weeks to go, and we looked at what we have. So we have the Barjeel collection, the art collection. We have the space, which is a space that can be modular. It can be changed and turned. The walls can have different configurations. And we have the digital archive of the Palestinian Museum. Of course, what would have been best is to also have some works from the Palestinian Museum being part, like artworks, because it's a museum, they have artworks. But shipping, logistics, the war had started, it's so many difficulties. So we thought, and also a background story, the Palestinian Museum was closed at that time because of threats from settlers, because of the roads were blocked. So the Palestinian Museum is closed. So we thought of this space as an extension of the Palestinian Museum in Dubai, to have collaborator like Barjeel from Sharjah. And then we just dealt with what we had, what materials we had on at that point. And because of the space restrictions or the space requirements, that it's so big, the volume was very important. So the more works, the better, just to fill the walls and to exhibit as many works as possible. And then the selection of the Palestinian Museum Digital Archive was focused on Gaza. So this was the theme of the digital archive. So it's about Gaza, from collections from Gaza. They had the Palestinian Museum team, of course, picked it. And then we discussed production materials and hanging and how they can be in relation to each other. But you have to know, like the time restriction also played a major role in just taking strong decisions. It's such an important question that I keep thinking about it. I don't have an answer per se, but I think this separation between arts and the political movement is not an accurate. I don't know. Like the context we're in today might not be the best representation of what art can play, like the role that art can play. But on the other hand, this brings us back to what can we do in the resources that we have, in the constraints that we have. What can we do? And we go back to this creating space. So me as a person working in the arts and culture, the biggest contribution I can do right now to counter what's happening and the political silencing and the shrinking space is to create space wherever I can. And this has a big impact, of course, like the narrative that you present, the stories that you present, the audiences that you reach. For example, On This Land opening, the opening night of On This Land, we had 1,800 people come to the opening. And that's such a huge number for just one opening night of an art exhibition. That never happens. And that shows you something. When you are relevant to the audience come to you, then you make a real impact. This is one area I can think of, but you're right, this question is super important. And I'm very happy that we are thinking about this together and that we continue to think about this together, that this is a continuous conversation.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think we have time for like one other question. I think I just would also just like to comment that what's been so interesting for me, as somebody that has like, one foot in kind of the social sciences and then the other in the arts and humanities. So I'm constantly thinking about the relationship between, materiality, like economic structures, for example, and then representation. So kind of, the sorts of things that artists do, like the ideas, for example, that they are able to communicate through their work. And what I found is actually that during this time, there's been a very interesting, kind of relationship between the two that I've seen. So I know, for example, some artists have had their artworks returned to galleries by collectors because collectors have seen, for example, that they're posting certain kind of political views online. Galleries have seen collectors boycott them because they feel like, oh, if they're posting something pro-Palestinian, then they don't want to support this kind of thing. You've also seen the same thing at universities, primarily in North America, where like very rich donors will say, we have the right to dictate what happens at the university because we're giving money to it. So in fact, I think it's a little simplistic to assume that the art world somehow is like completely separate, from the world of finance. I think those things are constantly interrelated. But I do also completely recognize and see this question of like, when should there be also other kinds of priorities that are operating, alongside what is being done in certain kinds of spaces at the representational level. And from from the little that I've seen at Alserkal, there have been like donations. I mean, not in a kind of simple humanitarian way, like let's just charity will solve the problem type thing, but like genuine initiatives by like more than one kind of organization.
So there are many ways. I can tell you what we try to do, or like what we try to experiment with. For example, we know that sometimes the galleries can be an intimidating space for the general public to just enter. So we try to think together of how can we bring the audience inside the gallery, and it's the general audience, not the collector who wants to buy, but people who are interested to look at art and learn about art and engage with art. So we started organizing these things that we called slow art walks, and it's a tour in the galleries, but it's slow in the sense that we don't go to all the galleries in 1 hour quickly. We ask the artist or curator who is leading the tour to pick 3-4 artworks maximum and speak about them in depth with the audience, and these have been a huge success. We've had so many people, they're always fully booked. People love them because they can take the time, they can ask questions, they can engage with the art. And the artists who are leading the tours also learn a lot from speaking about art in a different way. We also experimented with having these tours in different languages, and that was a huge eye-opening. For artists who speak in Arabic to lead it in Arabic, or Hindi, or Tagalog, or Malayalam, or any other language. That was also like an eye-opening experience for the artists themselves, returning to their languages and relearning art in a different language. So it's always about being conscious of this fact, and always try to experiment and try to think of new and creative ways to bring people and to be more relevant, of course, to be more relevant to the audience.
Okay, well, I think we're at the end of our time, and really, Zaina, I can't tell you how appreciative I am that you've joined us and shared so much of your work and your really deep insights into what does it mean to try to engage with the world, in ways that are aligned with your principles, not simply choosing the easy option or the option that maybe from like the optics looks like it looks good, but the truth is maybe it's not doing the really difficult work. And in some ways, I see this also as an invitation for all of us to kind of, take a hard look at not just what we're doing, but how we're living our lives. How do you align what you hope the world will be with what you're actually doing in this present moment? That's really kind of the big takeaway for me from our conversation today. And so thank you so, so much for sharing everything so generously. And we'll definitely circulate the link to the 3D walkthrough of the exhibition, where, as you showed us, you could really see that kind of like stopping at each image or each piece of artwork can give you more information about who produced the work, when was it produced, and this can be such a actually valuable resource for people who are interested in research and other forms of activism. So really, thank you so, so much, Zaina. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mai, and everyone. It was lovely speaking to you all.